I'm Ben Tolhurst. I've spent 25 years in the outsourcing industry, working for big corporates across a range of sectors. And following a climate epiphany, I quit my job and now work in a variety of roles, including as a director for real sustainability. Everything I'm focused on now is about helping businesses take action to tackle the climate, ecological, and social crisis. And in this short piece, I'm going to provide some context to the crisis and what to do about it. There are three things I'd like to say about this graph. Firstly, CO2 surpassed safe levels way back in the mid-1980s. And by safe, I mean the human race has never existed in a world of CO2 this high. Why does that matter? Because CO2 is an indicator of warming, and warming is really bad for the planet. The second thing I'd like to say is that levels are continuing to rise despite the global conferences, agreements, and pledges of all the countries around the world. And the third thing to say is that CO2 levels set to continue to rise further. Since the Paris Agreement, where countries agreed to limit fossil fuels, 60 of the world's biggest banks have ploughed nearly $4 trillion into projects which actually finance the burning of fossil fuels. And we can see the impact this is having on the climate. According to a UN report, the number of extreme weather events over the last 20 years has doubled compared with the previous 20 years. So in the last 20 years, we've seen around 7,000 extreme weather events affecting over 4 billion people, some of them more than once, costing trillions of dollars. The very land we live on is becoming uninhabitable at an alarming rate. There is a term, the human climate niche, which refers to the areas on Earth where humans have historically flourished due to favourable climatic conditions. The optimum mean annual temperature where we flourish is around 13 degrees C. Yet by 2070, according to current predictions, the mean annual temperature will rise to 20 degrees, which has all kinds of implications, not least on food and water security. And perhaps most chillingly, the mean annual temperature of 1/5 of the world's land, where 3.5 billion people live, will rise to 29 degrees, meaning that 1/3 of the world's population will be forced to deal with temperatures which are actually unsustainable for human life, which of course will lead to mass migration, civil breakdown, and all that comes with that. In terms of biodiversity, humans often see themselves as outside of nature, yet we are an intrinsic part of it. We rely on healthy biodiversity for our food, our medicine, our clothing. And yet, over my lifetime, the populations of mammals, reptiles, fish, and amphibians has fallen by 70%. In fact, today, of all the mammals on Earth, 96% are livestock and humans, leaving space for only 4% of wild animals. And every degree that we heat the planet, the yield of staple cereal crops will decline by 10%. 14 of the world's biggest cities are currently experiencing water scarcity or drought, meaning that food and water security are in grave danger. There is simply one point to make here. The impact of the climate, ecological, and social breakdown is incredibly unevenly distributed and hugely unfair. The global south, where 88% of the world's population live, are responsible for just 8% of the climate crisis, and yet they bear 82% of the cost, and of course the untold personal devastation caused by it. And perhaps most scarily, based on all of the data, the science is clear. We are heading for extinction as a human race within our children's lifetime, unless we do something radical now. The UK government has in fact been told to prepare for the adaptation of a 2 to 4 degree warmed world by their own committee on climate change. The problem is that a 4-degree world just isn't tenable. But there is some good news. We actually have the resources, the know-how, the ingenuity, and the money to address this. The big question is, do we want it enough? Are we prepared to take sufficient action to try to mitigate this situation? What we need is a significant and fundamental shift of consciousness. We need to act like the truth is real. In terms of solutions, at a global level, we have Project Drawdown, a not-for-profit, non-partisan organisation that seeks to address the greenhouse gas issue by highlighting 100 solutions. I'll just pick up on the top 3 here. Food waste, a third of the world's food is never eaten, squandering a whole host of resources and greenhouse gases. Education and health for women, particularly in developing countries, to create greater upward mobility, planetary stewardship, amongst other things, and a plant-rich diet. If cattle were their own nation, they would be the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. I'd also just touch on 5 important things which a business can do, which covers raising awareness, educating staff and clients, and legitimizing the conversation so people can speak out about the crisis. Rapid decarbonisation, setting clear targets and executing plans on delivering them, including scope 3, not just 1 and 2. Scrutinising our supply chains so we truly understand their impacts, both good and bad, and shifting away from ecologically destructive industries through a just transition of jobs, and embracing and driving the circular economy to end planned obsolescence. In fact, all business decisions need to be made through the lens of the climate, ecological, and social impact. So I'll leave you with just one quote. We don't have a right to ask whether we are going to succeed or not. The only question we have the right to ask is, what's the right thing to do? What does the earth require of us if we want to continue to live on it? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Luffman, Product Director at Finisterre. 1. Speaking out for urgent action. We will speak out for urgent action in the fashion industry to galvanise an industry-wide debate on tackling the climate, ecological and social crisis. We do not believe that voluntary agreements are sufficient to address the current crisis. We therefore call for fashion leaders to speak out publicly in support of laws and binding mandatory agreements, which hold companies to account regionally, nationally, and internationally, in line with recognised and science-based targets. As an industry, we will promote and share best practices to inspire and support companies to adopt radical and accelerated actions to urgently tackle the climate, ecological, and social crisis.
Hi, I'm Ben Tolhurst. I'm an associate of Real Sustainability. Our second commitment involves decarbonisation, restoration of ecosystems and biodiversity, and it falls into 3 parts. Firstly, the fashion industry must reach net zero carbon by 2030 through rapid emissions reduction with minimal and diminishing use of offsetting. We urge a radical cut in the industry's use of energy, water and toxic chemicals. Secondly, we call for a shift to low impact materials. The industry must cease using virgin synthetic fibres and instead adopt recyclable, biodegradable materials. We urge the industry to use natural materials produced through the principles of regenerative organic agriculture, favouring small scale and local producers. This will radically improve soil health, restoration of ecosystems, biodiversity, carbon drawdown, and the development of carbon neutral handcraft production. And these materials should be independently recognised or certified. And then finally, in line with the circular economy, we call for product longevity and the promotion of resale, rental and repair to extend useful life of existing items and so reduce the need for virgin materials. We also call for the recycling and the reuse of existing synthetic fibres.
Hi, my name is Kalkidan. I am co-founder of Sancho's and Shwap, and I'm reading number 3, Social Justice and the Just Transition. We demand that we treat workers fairly and with dignity across the supply chain. We speak out for workers' rights, fair wages, freedom of association, and gender equality, and challenge systemic racism and other forms of abuse of power. We advocate for adherence to existing best practice frameworks to protect workers within the supply chain, such as, but not limited to, Fair Wear, WFTO, and the Modern Slavery Act. We will call for new, binding, enforceable, and auditable agreements and legislation wherever necessary. We call for direct and long-term partnerships with suppliers to invest in the supply chain, community, and climate resiliency globally. Suppliers are partners in the transformation of our industry and must be active participants in decision-making. We convene thinking and practice on low carbon, for example, hand production, craft-based livelihoods, and fair wages towards a just transition.
Hi, I'm Safia Minney, founder of Real Sustainability and People Tree. Commitment 4, radical transparency in corporate governance. We demand board-level engagement and role modelling, with all business decisions being assessed with respect to the climate, ecological and social impacts, to put planet and people alongside profit. Companies should know who work in their supply chains and should deliver full public disclosure of tiers 1, 2 and beyond. We demand that companies take responsibility for human rights due diligence and that they ensure living wages for supply chain workers, the right to unionisation and gender and racial equality. We call for companies to meet their commitments and engage with all stakeholders, not only shareholders. We call for standardised industry-wide methodology and measurement criteria underpinned by a common language and consistent reporting of social and environmental impacts. Also, companies must pay their fair share of tax and promote diversity, inclusion and gender equality and stakeholder engagement on boards. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Berry, Director of Sustainable Business at Farfetch. Commitment number 5, the regenerative fashion model. With rapidly increasing pressure from citizens, employees, investors, and the inescapable reality of the climate crisis, brands must acknowledge that the existing economic model based on infinite growth on a planet with finite resources must stop. We call for a commitment to transition to a regenerative model for the fashion industry. Fashion can become a positive force for good in restoring our ecosystems, biodiversity, and climate, whilst empowering communities, democracy, and health. We call for all fashion companies to take rapid action immediately to manage their operations within planetary boundaries, whilst transforming their models to one that is fair for all.
I'm Mike, 19 years at Marks & Spencer, leading the sustainability journey there. I'm a passionate advocate for business being a force for good, for environment and for social reasons. And I'm backing Fashion Declare's open letter. Now, the climate and ecological and social crises, the most serious issues of our time. The fashion industry is and has been a huge contributor to this crisis, but it also can be a significant force for positive change. The knowledge, ideas and technology exists for the transformation of the fashion industry. What has been lacking has been the collective will. Real Sustainability is launching Fashion Declares in the way that we have seen Declares movements launched in other industries. For example, business declares, architects declare, music's declare. Fashion Declares is a community of professionals in the fashion industry at all levels who believe passionately that fashion can be a leading force in tackling the conjoined climatic, ecological and social crises that we face. The fashion industry employs millions of people across the world. When we come together, we've seen a powerful collective voice to change our industry. We recognise the urgent need to build a new systemic and inclusive fashion industry that celebrates different initiatives and approaches to production and consumption that puts people and planet first. We need a system where our new fashion production is net zero, uses resources within planetary boundaries, promotes human rights and fair and positive livelihoods. Now, the Fashion Declares community advocates for a fashion system where the sustainability agenda is not confined to sustainability teams alone, but underpins all our work and thinking. We're focused on helping everybody in the fashion industry become stubborn optimists and act in accordance with the climate, ecological and social emergency. We'll show how this creative and innovative sector can drive its use and passion to take a leading role in tackling these crises and develop a new sustainable business model, mindsets and behaviours. We're signing up to the goals of the 5 commitments of the Fashion Declares movement. Will you? Thank you.